Okay, hello, welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. I am your host, Kim Kimball, Somatic Leadership Coach for highly sensitive and neurodivergent business owners. I have a really special and amazing episode today about self leadership with Alex. I am going to allow her to introduce herself and we are going to dive right in.
Yeah. Hi. First of all, Kim, thank you for having me. I love the name of the podcast. When
Thank
you sent
you.
me the invite, I was like, oh, that's a perfect name for this podcast.
Yes,
So I love that. I'm Alexandra. Really good to be here. I'm a leadership coach who, in essence, I help people build a bigger emotional capacity for the things that they want. And I work with people who are seeking more than just performative success. They're really seeking to feel powerful from the inside out and have their lives, their relationships, their businesses reflect that. I'm I kind of feel like coaching is in my bones at this point. I've been in this world for 14 plus years and all the way from back when only WordPress existed and Instagram was just taking off. And so it's definitely a love of mine. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I have been in this for 7 years. I didn't realize you had been in it for double the amount of time. And even just in the small amount of time, I say small, it's kind of long in coaching world now, 7 years.
Right, right.
Um, but I've seen so many shifts and changes in that amount of time, even, and
So
just
many.
Instagram and platforms. And it's just so rapidly evolving. And I love that you've been in it so long. And just to explain to folks a little bit of I have been a long time fan of Alexandra's work, and I've been able to experience her work as well. And um, just, I see so few people really bringing the depth to their work that you do. And so it's something that I want to
Thank you.
start with and preface with. And I think so many people, especially in the business space, can just be all about hitting metrics and goals, and they really don't take into account who they're being in the process
Mhm.
and the impact that's having on them as a person outside of being a business owner. And I think that's something that you do so well. And I also, it's something that I just notice about you, is just how much you go first. Like, I know that there is this a thought of like leaders go first. Well, you and I are both leadership coaches, and I think the intersection of our work is interesting because it's like it's just distinct, but it's very similar. But how you just really model what leadership is by going first. I've seen you take a step back, a sabbatical. How long was your sabbatical even? Was it a year?
Yeah, so social media sabbatical. So I
Yeah.
work with clients behind the scenes and have kept my business going, by word of mouth and referral. But my social media sabbatical was just about a year. I would say maybe
Well,
like
yeah.
under, yeah. So it was
And you're
about a year.
just recently back and you're talking about like all the
Yeah.
discomfort that brought up in you. And so
Yeah.
that was a huge thing. And I've seen you a step into confronting like intimacy fears and female friendships and things like that and going on these really intense retreats. And so I just would love to hear more. Like, what is your definition of leadership, and why is it important to you in particular to live out your own leadership first?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, I think leadership is less about being followed and it's more about being felt. And I've always kind of, if I'm being honest, I've never really had a business brain. And so a lot of people have this like very strategic kind of brain and they kind of see metrics and data. And I've always had a very relational brain. It's just what I veer towards, it's what I understand. I understand the models of relationships and really the felt sense that's within that. I'm very comfortable with intimacy, for example. That's never really been where I've kind of uh, had to build an understanding of the world. And so for me, leadership's always been about being felt, right? It's been about being in connection with ourselves and in the embodied practice of self partnering, and then bringing that out into the relationships that we have, whether that's a relationship with our lover or our friends or our parasocial relationships on the internet. or our money or our time. For me, leadership really is the self connection in movement, right? Self connection um, in process. And I've kind of always believed that the only way for people to um, relate to me, even in a parasocial way, is to feel me. And in order for them to be able to feel me, I kind of have to go first. I have to feel my way through a lot of things first. And, it's not always convenient. It's, in fact, rarely convenient to kind of go this route. It's not the easier route, but it is, for me at least, it's the truer route. And it does demand, and it has demanded, if I want to share something, if I want to be felt, I'm going to have to feel my way through. And I'm going to have to really be in process and in relationship with whatever season of my life I'm in, or with whatever specific part of myself I'm integrating, or with whatever, with whatever cycle I'm kind of trying to bring an end to. I've got to be in relationship with that. And so leadership for me is really just letting people see you be in connection with yourself and letting them feel that. And that's kind of the way that I've always approached it. And it's not necessarily, I think, what we're taught or what has been societally exalted, we'll say. But that's my definition, and that's kind of always the way that I've lived through it. And it's the way that makes the most sense to me. And my nervous system resonates with other people doing that as well. And that's actually what makes me follow people, is if I can feel them, not if they want me to follow them. And so I kind of just found my way through my own leadership. It feels more like me when I go first. And it feels more like a real relationship when I go first, rather than when I am just trying to give information or bypass my own process to get to some kind of pinnacle. I don't really have an interest in that, because I kind of like the uh fermentation of it all. I kind of like that, like, brooding, dark, difficult part of the process, and getting the fruits of that.
Hmm. Well, we're only a few minutes into the podcast, and I've already had tears brimming in my eyes. So here we go. Let's hunkle up. Um, I relate to that so much, of like not really having a business mind.
Mhm.
It's something that I've had to work really hard at, and something that doesn't come naturally to me. So much like what you're saying, and as a business owner, as a solopreneur, it's like you got to wear all the hats, and so you eventually get there. But just having this idea of it being relational, and really that leadership is coming from this place of connection with ourselves, this deep connection with ourselves, that and feeling ourselves, and then other people feeling that. Really, honestly, the reason that I got emotional with that, A, because it just feels so true for me, but B, because it also helped wrap words around something that I haven't been able to name in the online
Mm,
space for me recently,
mm.
that I'm just feeling such a lack of that, that it
Yeah,
kind of made me feel starving.
yeah, yeah.
It's just, it feels very vapid,
Yes.
for lack of a better word. And there's just like, I don't feel anybody. I don't feel anything.
Yeah,
And it's coming through from this real disconnection from
yeah,
ourselves, I think, right?
yeah.
And that disconnection happening from, like what you're talking, just the pinnacle seeking happening, and we're losing ourselves in the process.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation actually just this morning with my girlfriend around the implications of parasocial relationships, and how we were just saying this morning how there's such like a fast food mentality to it, where it's kind of like um oftentimes attention seeking that's masking as leadership, or that's masking as depth, or that's masking as something else. And it can feel hollow, and it can be hard to name what that is. It can be hard to put your finger on it, because it looks like relational integrity, or it looks like pretty good, but it also doesn't necessarily feel great. And at least for me, and one of the things I was in discussion about this morning, is there's an element of depth that gets missed when we are disconnected from ourselves, but still wanting the fruits of what depth creates. And that can feel really, really incoherent. And it can also be really hard to figure out that that's what's going on.
Yeah, and I think highly sensitive and neurodivergent people oftentimes pick up on those places of incoherence
Yep.
more than other people, right?
Absolutely. Oh,
It's
absolutely.
like there's something here where it's like, oh, this is kind of jamming in my system. I'm picking up on these incongruencies, right?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Definitely. I think, I don't know about you, but a big part of my journey, being neurodivergent, being sensitive, having ADHD, picking up on all these nuances, being more relationally oriented. I, for the longest time, I would kind of point that criticism back at myself and be like, well, you don't kind of like fit into society. You don't really like fit into what business is doing. You don't really fit into, I used to be like, why is nobody else like talking about this? Or why is nobody else considering this? Or like, why is nobody sitting with this? Like, what do you mean you don't have deep feelings? Like, what is going on here? Right. And it was really confusing for a long time. And I also see this with a lot of neurodivergent people is we can be so quick to, because we've been taught to kind of turn it in on ourselves instead of really looking at, actually, we are picking up on really important nuances that do actually create huge ripples in leadership and in uh, authenticity, and that really kind of bring the robustness back to the fast food versions of those words. I think that a lot of things have become a little bit more fast food. It's like authenticity, it's great, cool. And I feel that a lot of neurodivergent people are really, really looking at like, let's look at the tendrils of that and what does that mean? And where is it not happening and why doesn't it happen? And what's going on with that? And yeah, that can be felt. Like we can kind of feel the in-betweens of everything, which is beautiful and a little crazy making and also beautiful.
Yes, I talk about this so often. I'm grateful for you naming this. I call this
Mhm.
that we question ourselves rather than the shoulds, you know?
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and it's just internalized shame, right? It's
Yeah.
internalized
Exactly.
ableism, it's internalized shame.
Exactly. Exactly.
We turn against ourselves in this way, and just like you, it was many years of my
Yeah.
own journey until I stopped doing that and started to
Yeah.
question the shoulds instead of myself, right?
Absolutely.
It took me getting to a breakdown of like I'm in a job that I should love, that should fit, or even in my own business, right? Of I should do this fast food version, but it doesn't work for
Right.
me. It
This
jams
should
in
be
my
easier.
sister. Right.
Right, right. This should be easier. I shouldn't be as emotional about this, or this shouldn't be as troublesome as it feels, or I should just be able to do this with no reservation or whatever it is. But it really yeah, there's such a depth that comes with certain nervous systems that is almost a requirement,
Yeah.
whether we like it or not, which it is a beautiful gift. And it's it is it can feel labor intensive to learn to own that gift.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, I know that in your work, you work with people who are high capacity and highly sensitive.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear what they usually struggle with the most.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people who are high capacity, highly sensitive, a lot of imposter syndrome, right? There's like this really revved up ability to perform, but this really deep connection to not feeling coherent with the performance. So I see that a lot. I see a lot of over functioning, right? So this sense of I can only kind of center myself when I've taken care of everyone and everything constantly until the end of time, since it never really stops, right? I see a lot of drive being developed under pressure instead of presence, right? So like instead of being present with um like a lot of my clients, instead of being present with their own desires or even their own things that are emerging, it's really more so a drive from pressure and from having to upkeep appearances. Um, what else? I see a lot of performance over creating, but also this like really deep ache to create, right? I see longing, a lot of longing for rest and longing for creativity and longing for connection, but a deep fear of slowing down, right? And so I see a lot of people who've really learned how to do the business thing well and how to do the job thing well and how to do the success thing well, but they have aspects of themselves that they're absolutely aching for. And they start to get to a point where, what's worked for them is no longer working. It's starting to break down. And their leadership is basically calling for um, a completely different approach and one that does not self neglect. I also see a lot of subtle self neglect, either blatant or subtle self neglect, happen for a lot of my clients as well. Because we're often the easiest thing to neglect, in this kind of society under capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. We're all kind of primed for it anyways. And so I see a lot of subtle self neglect. And yeah, and within everybody, there is just an ache. There's an ache. It's like this unspoken knowing that there's something. And it's almost like this um, ancient free fall, I guess is the best way to put it, right? It's like we all know it. We all know it. We can feel it. We can't always speak to it. We can't always name it, but we all kind of know it. And I work with a lot of people who've been putting on the mask for a long time, but are really craving that like ancient free fall into themselves and into a new way of doing things and into a way that is more from the inside out rather than kind of this chase to the summit.
Mm.
Yeah.
I relate so much with everything that you shared. I've had a deep process with all of those things.
Hmm.
Um, the one that I feel is most resonant for me right now is this like really deep ache to create.
Same.
I I've always considered myself a writer. Like I could publish books right now based on the amount of like journals that I have and books of
Beautiful.
poetry and things like that.
Uh,
And ever since I was a really little girl, I would just like that's the way I've processed my emotions and my feelings and sort of gotten it all out on the page. Poems will just like flow out of me as my way of processing my inner world. And there's also something that as a business owner and content creation where I get sucked out of creating for myself
mhm.
and I get sucked out of this, just for sheer lack of time, to be honest, of like if I am a business owner and a mom to a 2-year-old and a wife to my partner and like all of these things, it's like it can kind of just get pushed out. And then there's this ache that you're talking about is a wonderful way to describe it of like, I just want to create to create.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to create for myself. I just want to
Yeah.
create because I'm a creative being, because this is
Hmm.
who I am, because,
Hmm.
um, and then I get sort of like, thinking about the constant journey for me with that is, well, obviously, how can I carve out time for me to do it just to do it? But also, like, how can I infuse more of that into my work, right? Is a
Yeah.
constant journey of like, how can I be able to funnel that into my work in a way that ultimately does feel fulfilling creatively and not just like I'm catering to an algorithm, right? So,
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that's been really interesting about coming back on social media is that, there's been like this sense of like pumping the brakes because there is this really unique experience of I spent a year just like not sharing anything with anybody. And I was like, let's go paint in the woods. Let's go do this. Like, let's frolic. Let's da da da. And there's a really interesting experience in coming back to social media, that, I can see what you're talking about a lot, because it's almost like this hotbed for anybody who has a system that's used to outsourcing or kind of giving away their inner authority, or, just even used to attuning. I'm really used to attuning externally. I have a very high exteroception. And so I can attune very well outside of me. Um, and it's been a really interesting process coming back into social media. I've been taking my time with it. It's a little clunky because exactly what you're saying, where it's like, wait a second, how do I bring what that was into this like this place where it doesn't really feel like it fits, but I know it does. There's just a lot of dissonance still in my system with it that is longing to be felt and longing to be looked at and longing to be challenged and kind of integrated and faced in a lot of ways. But yeah, it can be very, very difficult to, especially for people who've maybe have a history of codependency or outsourcing, to maintain that deep self connection amongst a lot of people, parasocially or not, right? And that kind of is, I notice that as well. I go through that as well. There's like a deep ache for creativity, but also a deep ache to find how to integrate that when a lot of other people are there. And yeah, I completely understand that. And I'm also seeing a lot of people in general just ache for creativity right now. A lot of my clients are aching for their own creativity, um, whether they're working 10 hours a day and are just trying to get a little bit for themselves. And we're all kind of taking this look at this line between the separation of like work and play, and also how do we do like work and play like this, right? And it really is such a profound conversation, because it is, I believe, kind of dismantling like the idea of work itself in the way that we know it. And that's a jarring process.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah,
I resonate so much with all of that, and it's kind of creating a new paradigm for ourselves, really. And
absolutely.
of course that's going to feel clunky and challenging because
Yeah.
we don't have a framework. We don't have a
Right.
blueprint. You're creating something new, and
Yeah.
we're kind of coming out of this industrial revolution. We are going to be cogs in a machine, and
Right.
time for money exchange, and end stage capitalism and all these things.
Right.
And now, especially
Right.
as business owners, we are in a space where, like, well, we can do what we want, so what do we want, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's like we were given the keys to the car, but no one really taught us to drive over there. It's like we were taught to drive in this circle around the driveway. But now it's like take the keys and there's the highway. Okay, we gotta figure this out. We gotta kind of like we're gonna hit something. Like that bumper is not gonna be smooth by the end of this.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, something I know that we share in our work is this idea that self partnering is actually the bedrock foundation of self leadership. I know we've touched
Yeah.
on that a little bit already, but I would love for you to tell me a little bit more about that and why you think it's important.
Oh, yeah. What a big question. What a great question. I think that whenever we are not partnering with ourselves, we run into the issues that stem from upholding the harmful things that we've learned, right? We run into the issues of kind of being in a perpetual flight response from ourselves and just going and never really living. Um, I think that I think that the importance of it is kind of akin to the importance of aliveness. I know that sounds like really big and really vast and really like a big thing to say. But I think that when we're not in connection with ourselves, when we're not actually partnering with ourselves, whether we know it or not, which is an important thing to name, whether we know it or not, we're not really partnering with our creative work, and we're not really partnering with our partner, and we're not really partnering with our business, and we're not really partnering with our money, right? If we are void of being in connection with ourselves, something in us is also not in connection with all the things that we're touching. And so just from a level of like, we all deserve to be in aliveness, right? So I think it's really important from that level. Like, we all deserve to be in aliveness with um, the worlds we're building and the things we're leading and the things we're doing. But also, maybe not in the short run, but in the long run, it also makes it more sustainable and easier in the sense that it makes it more possible to um, manage internally and externally, right? I think self-partnering is such a foundational requirement for leaders because it's also the food of sustainability. There are a lot of people who built amazing things and then collapse under the weight of it, right? And then what gets lost in that is their sense of nourishment, wonderment, their aliveness, their participation, right? Like, they get taken out. And we're all here, even if we're here to build things or build a business or do this or like, launch something to space, which whatever. Even if we're here to do those things, if we're not participating in it, we're not really in our aliveness. We're not really kind of in our purpose, which is to kind of, I believe, be in participation with our lives. When we lead, again, I don't believe that leadership is just to be followed. I believe it's to be felt. And if we can't have a felt sense of ourselves, it's going to be really hard to have that ripple out to other people. It's going to be really hard to have that ripple out to our mission. It's going to be really hard to have that ripple out to our families. It's going to be really hard to have that ripple out to our experience with money and time and everything else. And so, yeah, I think it's the difference between leadership as we've learned it being a power consolidation versus leadership being a power disbursement. And I believe when we are connected to ourselves, it is a power disbursement rather than a power consolidation. And I think that that's really important for businesses and movements alike.
Oh, so much here. I especially loved you saying that self-partnering is the food of sustainability in your business. I've recently renamed my private coaching offering to sustainable growth.
Mm,
Because sustainability, I think, is what so many people are seeking.
yeah,
Because they do, you can build and build and build, and then you collapse under the weight of it. Just as you're saying, of like, you wake up a couple of years into your business and you've reached the metrics, and you're like, well, why do I feel dead inside? why do I?
right,
Why is this completely unsatisfying? Well, I've met the things that they told me were going to feel satisfying, and it actually doesn't feel that way at all. And it's because, like you're saying, you didn't build it from this place of self partnering along the way. There
right,
wasn't that relationship happening.
right.
And just the sustainability piece being being so important. And not getting lost in the larger goals that Instagram land and all of these things would have us have set up as the metrics for success, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the difference between how it looks and how it feels, right? Like, I think self-partnering really focuses on how it feels, and that can also look great, but I think the traditional forms of leadership that we've been taught are really about how it looks. And the problem with that is that even if we achieve everything we want to achieve, like you said, if we feel dead inside, we're not actually enjoying the fruits of our labor. We're just laboring for nothing. And it's a scary concept to a lot of people to realize that if there is if there is chronic self-neglect in any endeavor, the labor won't even be kind of uh, worth it, because what gets washed away is the sense of self. inside of that is the enjoyment, is the fulfillment, is the ability to be in receptivity, is the ability to actually land at the summit and be like, okay, let me take this in. Let me be with this. Right. A lot of people just go, 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 go to make it look good. And then it feels terrible. And then they're more lost than they were when they started out.
Yeah, because then there's a disillusionment
Yep.
along with it.
Right. And then it's like the work is the problem, or this is the problem, or Instagram is the problem, or whatever is the problem. When in reality, it's really just the relationship that you have with yourself and are bringing to this is dysfunctional. It's just not functioning for you in the way that you want it to function. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you help people to redefine success so it actually feels fulfilling?
I think first, a lot of the things that I do with my clients in the beginning is we really start to kind of map out the terrain. Like, let's look at what's the language your life is speaking right now? What's happening? Why is this happening? Um, where is it working? Where is it functioning? Where is it not functioning? Right. Um, Success. I was just in a conversation again with my partner a couple of days ago, and I was like, we're like, success is I was like, success is subjective, da da da. And she was like, no, it's also objective. And I was like, well, what's the objective definition of success? And she said, when something's working. And I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that, right? That can be subjective. That can look different, right? But that something working is success. And so, in order to really help redefine success for clients, we really take a look at like what's working and what's not working, what's functioning and what's not functioning for what it is that you want, for what it is that you want to feel, and for who it is you want to become. Because you can be doing all the things, but if you're neglecting to see if it's functioning for what you want it to be functional for, you're going to constantly feel like you're chasing success and chasing success and chasing success. When we can redefine, well, let's look where it's functioning, where it's not functioning. Let's just like get under the hood and actually see from a functional standpoint. Is this functioning for that? Is the way that you're doing this functioning for that? Then we start to really take a look at what's living inside them. What are the mechanisms they're operating by, and where can we shift those and change those and upgrade those and make those more malleable to where they want to be and where they want to go.
Yeah, there's such an important piece there around recognizing that there are some ways that it is functioning. You know,
Mhm.
so many times we want to just throw it out and be like, well, this doesn't work anymore. Well, hold on, slow down. There are parts of it that are, or you would not be doing it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And also, what's it functioning for? Right.
Right.
If it's a lot of the time when we kind of look under the hood, people see, oh, what I've been doing is helping me avoid this. What would I create if I was no longer afraid of that? That was integrated and I could make a decision that came from my agency, my inner authority, like my seat of power. And that often looks sometimes the same, sometimes different, but it feels different. And that's usually what people are craving.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that because I tell clients that all the time of like, the outward thing that you're doing may be the exact thing, same thing,
Exactly.
but the
Exactly.
inner motivation and how you feel doing it is profoundly different. There's a big
Yeah.
shift there.
Yeah.
And that can
Yeah.
be hard to wrap your mind around, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Even looking at, I've been talking to a couple of clients recently this week about even looking at basic definitions of things, right? Like with one of my clients, we're really looking at how do you define work? What comes up for you when you say the word work? What's the definition of work to you? What have you internalized about work? What's the definition you have of responsibility, right? If we have definitions that are going to absolutely burn us out or give us the perception that we're completely overriding ourselves, we're going to have a relationship that's really, really tense with the things that we may have to do or with the things that we want to do. with the things that we care about doing. I've actually seen this with some people. They'll they'll hesitate on even being in connection with themselves because we call it the work, and they have a connotation of work that's not functional for where they want to go. And so it's really starting to take a look at how are we defining our lives, and what is the way that we're relating to things, and what's your definition of this, and what's your definition of that, where'd you learn that, and why, and what tweaks can we make to have you not only uh, perceive it differently, but have a felt sense of that as well. How can we work with your system, your, internal, your nervous system, your mental system, your brain system, like everything? How can we kind of bring those all into the same team
Mm,
and move from there and make it more functional in a way that's felt?
yeah. This kind of leads perfectly into the next question as we're talking about, shifting definitions of things, letting go of things. What's a belief you used to hold about leadership or success that you've completely let go of?
Mm. I would say a belief I used to hold about leadership, probably honestly, that it has to look good. Probably that you're only a leader if you look good. Um, that was a really big one for me. For the longest time, I couldn't make sense of being powerful or in my power if I didn't look a certain way. Um, you know, that started, it's no longer here, but that started back in like, I would say when like the internet, what were the Periscope days? Like 2016. There was a really, really, there was a really intense movement at that time, I think in 2016, where like the popular coaches or like the most followed coaches were all very pink. There's a lot of like pink dresses in front of the Eiffel Tower. Like it was very much a very certain brand. And that brand of people and women happened to be like the pinnacle, right? And I I don't look like that, right? Half of my head is shaved. I am like in the queer community, like very, very different than what was being presented. And I really had to grapple for a long time with leadership isn't what things look like. It is how things feel. It isn't what things look like. It is like belief in action. It isn't what things look like. It is being so comfortable with yourself that other people feel safe around you. Right. And I really had to go through that process because it was such a mirror of like, you are the different one here. It was very much when the coaching industry was going through like the popular girls phase of like the high school phase. Not so much there anymore, but it definitely went through many years of that. And that was a really, really potent time for me in having to redefine leadership and having to redefine leadership in a way that included me. And it wasn't just image based. And it wasn't just, can we look like, you know, the the most basic form of popular girl that we kind of all understand or that we as millennials have grown up with. Right. And so that was a really big one, that leadership has to look a certain way, or leadership has to look um, polished, clean, um, and any kind of like normative, whether that's like heteronormative or whatever it is, right? I really had to unlearn that in order to keep going, to be honest.
Yeah, any normative.
Yeah.
I I resonate with this so much, especially from the perspective of these last 3 years of my life have probably been the hardest of my life.
Hmm.
And I've carried on in my business, right?
Hmm.
And I don't mean carried on in like a bootstrap kind of a way. That's not what I
Right.
mean. I mean lots of tending to myself, um, and continuing on in the midst of that. And this notion, this idea, I've had to dismantle this for myself of like, well, leadership means always having it all together and
Yeah.
not going through a challenging season or having everything be tidy and in order in your personal life and not having any struggles and not having these dark moments. And I've had to grapple with that over the last 3 years in some really real ways of like, that's not what it means. It just means that I'm exactly what I just said. I'm able to meet myself in that. I'm able
Yeah.
to uh be tender towards myself. I'm able to help myself process these challenges. I'm able to metabolize them and digest them for myself without extracting it for my
Hmm.
business. That's been a
Hmm.
huge thing. Like leadership doesn't need to look like I'm taking everything, every challenge in my life and putting it on display for likes and comments and things like that. um, that my process can be my process and I can share it when I'm ready to share it. And I don't need to extract from myself. That doesn't need to be leadership either. It's just
Hmm.
exactly what you're saying. How am I meeting myself in these challenging moments and not needing it to look any certain way, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. That somehow leadership has to be perfection. I think that a lot of us really took in that message somewhere, right? Because when things look good, we assume that they are good. And thus, when we have difficult uh, seasons or even just difficult systems, to be honest, like I'm very emotionally potent. It's not like the funnest thing ever on some days. Some days it, wow, adds to my depth and I absolutely love it. And some days it is it is the child within me that needs a lot of care and attention. And I I love that and don't always want to do it, right? And so I think that there's this such a deep assumption that if something looks good, it feels good or is good. And I love that you brought that up because I think that there's a lot of us who really internalize this idea that if we feel um, a way that others don't look, then there is something we are doing wrong or we must be doing wrong. Right. And that's obviously not the case. It's just certainly not. And it is a bridge to be able to meet ourselves in those moments and stand by our side and move forward regardless. And that is leadership, right? Being connected, being self-connected, and being willing to sit with ourselves in whatever season it is without turning our back on ourselves and rest when we need rest and inch ourselves forward when we need to inch ourselves forward and almost being um yeah, it's like dismantling the shame of that, not being in the shame of how I feel or what's going on in my life uh, negates my power. But instead, being like, what's going on in my life and how I feel in this thing that I'm going through adds to my connection with myself, which is my power. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up too. That's a huge one. That's a huge one.
Exactly that. Like my ability to be with and feel this and metabolize it is itself my power.
Yeah, that is leadership,
That
right?
is the power. That is the
Yeah, that
leadership.
that is the power. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that you said in that piqued my interest. You said, "I love this," meaning like your emotional depth. But I don't always want to do it. And I
Yeah.
just had like such a profound like yes, like
Yeah.
I think that's such a powerful thing to acknowledge. Um
Yeah.
because I think we can get stuck in these binaries even with ourselves, right? Of like of either like I love the fact that I'm highly sensitive and it comes with so many gifts and like my neurodivergence. Like also there's just times I annoy the shit out of myself and that's okay. Like,
100%.
you know, like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this binary, you know?
Yeah, it's like being in any relationship, right? Like when you're with your partner, it's like sometimes you're like, "Oh my God, like you shit gold." And then sometimes you're like, "If you breathe again, like I'm literally gonna leave." Right? Like it can be so it's such a spectrum. And if I don't have room for all of my spectrum, then I'm just kind of cutting parts of me out that are favorable, right? And so, yeah, I very much relate to my gifts in a way that's like I love them. There's such profundity to them. And also sometimes I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, oh my God, can we just do the thing? Like it is, like I don't need to be a bleeding heart about that right now, And so we're kind of doing that with a lightness of like, I'm not going to reject you. It's just we're so close and so comfortable to each other, comfortable with each other that, you know, we can handle it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And it kind of just has me thinking about how our tendency, obviously, not that this is exactly what we're talking about here, but our tendency to avoid ourselves
Hmm.
and how that really shows up for us and our businesses. Meaning, like, I think a lot of the times we can gravitate towards strategy a lot of the times and just thinking that, oh, this business strategy or this new business model or someone telling me exactly what to do here can help me just avoid
Yes.
myself, my inner world,
100%.
the work of self-partnering that you and I are talking about a lot on this episode. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that tendency, that desire to want to avoid ourselves, because it's my personal belief. This is what I love so much about business is that business, the whole point is to magnify this. The
Yeah.
whole point is to magnify how we're relating to ourselves.
Yeah.
And yet, so many of us, we want to just jump over that and just get to the strategy so we can avoid that relationship with ourselves entirely, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering
Yeah.
if we can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that like I feel for us as a society because I think we're primed for that. We are kind of told like capitalism does say, hey, we got the fix. Like we know what to sell you and you'll feel better, right? And so we are very primed, not only that, but we're primed to uh kind of dethrone our authority and hand it over to other people outside of us our whole lives, whether that's teachers or, religious people or whatever. We're very much primed from a young age, just living in society to look outside of ourselves, to look outside of ourselves for something to make us feel better. And so in business, we see this a lot where it's like the threat has become how we feel about ourselves. The threat has become being with our own confusion. The threat has become being in our own nebulous void of I don't know or of like I'm scared. The threat has become our own internal experience because we're so inundated with the fix is always going to be something out there. And I see this a lot in business, and I did this for years, where it's like if you can just find the right thing, yeah, you won't have to feel the feeling that you're avoiding. If you've been in this industry long enough, you will have gone through your period of like years and years where that didn't work. That just was not functional, no matter what you did and how much you spent, right? And that's where a lot of people either kind of like decide to go their separate ways, or they really look at like, oh shit, the thing, the thing that I'm trying to get to doesn't live outside of me. It actually lives going through whatever this thing is that I'm avoiding, this feeling, this experience, this memory, whatever it is. Um, but yeah, I really feel for us as a society because we're primed to do it and then we suffer the consequences of doing it. And then we also can utilize that as a way to justify that we are doing the right thing. For the longest time, I spent lots of money. I invested a lot of money on trying to find the right thing to do. And I was really scared of turning inward and sitting with like, oh, I just kind of feel inadequate. I just like don't really know what my own ideas are. Or like I don't really know what I think about this. Or like I don't really like that void of like, oh, I don't really feel confident here. Or like, oh, that's golly, like there's so much of that that I invested my way out of, and really believed it. I really was like, no, 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 it's just the thing. It's just the thing. And I feel for all of us because it is upheld by society. And so we don't even realize that we're avoiding ourselves for the longest time. We don't even know that we may be doing that. We're just kind of like, no, it is that strategy. That is the thing that I need. It really is the thing that I need, right? And it continues to perpetuate this rift between us and ourselves and us and our gold. Um, and it takes a lot of courage to slow down and be like, oh shit, I might have to give it all up to face this, right? Because we then think like, if we don't have the right strategy, we'll give it all up to face this. But it also is such a homecoming that can happen. But yeah, we are primed, we are told, I think that's why businesses like ours are so important because we're also telling the truth that like, it's, you're probably not going to buy your way out of this. You're probably not going to invest your way out of this. You probably you probably will have to face it, but the thing is you also get a gift out of that. The gift is the power that you're seeking. And whatever you're avoiding, the gift on the other side of processing, whatever that is like unlocking a lot of power and connection and self-reverence and inner authority. And that is going to change the way you move and change the strategies you even think you need. So yeah, we see that a lot.
Mm. My neurodivergence will not allow me to not tell the truth. So, yes, telling the truth, and it's much less sexy. It's much less what people want to hear sometimes, but you know what?
Yeah.
For the people who are ready to hear it, who have oftentimes been through all of the outsourcing and all of the
Yeah.
trying to find solutions outside myself and um, getting to that place of recognizing, oh, the answer is within me. It's
Yeah.
just the medicine people need, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even, a lot of times the answer is being okay with I don't know. And what comes after that when you sit with that for long enough is, well, what do I think? And that's when we really start to reactivate our creative potential, right? Outsourcing also strips us of creativity and problem solving skills because it says that problem can be solved over there, but it cannot be solved in here.
Yeah. Mm. Well, I think this is a gorgeous landing place. I do have rapid fire questions at the
Okay, let's
end,
do it.
but I would love to, before we shift into the rapid fire, to just ask where people can find out about you and your work if they're interested to learn more.
Yep, you can go to my website, alexandracovucci.com. You can look at my name it's a long name, so you can look at my name for the spelling of that. Instagram as well, at Alexandra Covucci, and Facebook as well, just my name. And those are the places that I'm hanging out right now. And you'll find all the information you need to contact me on my website and have a conversation. And yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that feels like it needs another moment to wrap up from the podcast today?
Um, I really appreciate the work that you do. I want to say that. I want to acknowledge you for that. These conversations are really, really important. And um, anybody that's resonating with any of this, you're not alone, nor have you ever been. We're just getting louder and we're just getting a little bit more clear. And there's always a seat for you at my table. And I believe I can speak for you as well, saying there's a seat at your table as well. And so, yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. And this has been a wonderful conversation.
Mm. Got me emotional again. What do you wish people knew about your experience as a highly sensitive neurodivergent person in the world?
I wish they knew that, are we on the rapid fires?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I wish that they knew um, God, I wish that they knew that it was like it was, there's so much aliveness in it. It is not a problem. It is such a source of aliveness and of all the things that we revere as a society, but don't necessarily um, prioritize, right? Like we revere art and we revere depth and we revere like painful movies and sad songs and we revere like, you know, poems about leaves and we revere these things as though they're in this like untouchable case, but that we like relate to so deeply. But they don't necessarily have the kind of power that I believe they should. I think that it's a really, really beautiful way to live. And I think that there's a lot in it that's needed in society.
Mm, love that.
Yeah.
What's the last thing that truly inspired you?
The last thing that truly inspired me. That's a really good question. I'm kind of getting micro inspired all the time by the birds outside, or I spend a lot of time really looking at things, really trying to romanticize things. And I find a lot of inspiration just in like the really subtle romanticizing of the mundane. And it's not really this big, grandiose thing, but I'll get really inspired by the color of rust on, um, a building as a way to remind me, like, hey, do whatever you want. Like, it's okay. Everything's okay. Everything's good. Things can be beautiful. Things are alive. Be in your aliveness as well. You're part of this. And so I get really inspired in mundane things.
Mm. What consistently brings you deep joy?
Good conversations, a really well made cup of coffee, um, relationships, creativity, um, birds. Ever since I went on my vision quest, birds give me deep joy. Um, animals, absolutely animals. There's just, I could be in the foulest mood and a dog can walk by me and I will just be like, ah, life is good. Um, intimacy. Yeah, I would
Mm,
say those things really bring me joy.
thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Have you seen that meme? And this just comes to mind with you talking about birds bringing you deep joy. Goes, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like meme. Those like you have no interest in birds your whole entire life, and then one day you wake up and you're like, oh my god, is that a yellow-throated warbler? And you become this person.
Yeah, I feel like that does also come with age. Like the amount of times I'm talking to my friends and I'm like, whoa, we're 38. Like, holy crap. I didn't even realize this was what we were interested in right now. Yeah, absolutely. After my vision quest, I became a bird person. I don't know the names, admittedly, still, but I'm definitely, I've got a soft spot for them.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time and just for your presence and allowing us and me the opportunity to get to know you more deeply. I just want to share that just in your presence today, I feel an even deeper invitation into my own depths and even more acceptance of my own depths, and that is a profound gift. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me know that. And Kim, thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.